Ooby-Doo is everyone's favorite boomer and vintage lens enthusiast. Back in December, the middle of December 2022, I took this lens out for a walk in the park, and it was a sunny, pleasant December weekend, and the sun was low on the horizon, and it was casting long shadows, but it was still bright and strong. So I used the Pentax-A, and I was having trouble with the focus confirmation. Since this is a manual focus lens, I just had to turn the lens until the red dot in the middle beeped, lit up and beeped, and then supposedly had to focus. And I think I only hit like 80% or something like that. So I said, well, I'm going to put this on the venerable Nikon Z50, and I'm going to take it to a Yuletime Christmas light spectacular in this town. And that was also at the end of December 2022. And of course, with this camera, since it's mirrorless, I push the plus button, and it magnifies the view, and I could just fine focus it. And then you could either take a picture, or you could reduce the magnification and then recompose. So, and I shot open at f4 because I want to see how much chroma there was and flare. And there was quite a bit in this lens in the corners. It was horrible. But there's only one caveat. The caveat is that it was 15 degrees out. I went to this the Green in Morristown. It was like 6:30 in the morning. It's 15 degrees out. Of course, this is in the car with me, and I had the heat on. And as soon as I got out, I just threw it on my neck and started walking down the street 5 minutes and started taking pictures. And I wonder if that had anything to do with it, because it's mostly metal construction. And I wonder if as the metal contracted, is putting stress on the glass until everything reached equilibrium. So you're going to see the pictures following, and which is weird. The only thing is they had a lot of flare and chroma, and the point lights of these strings of holiday lights. But if you look at the extended images, they come out really good. Like the side of a building, a fence, traffic cones, whatever you. They look really good, except that it exhibits this flare in the Christmas lights. So that's for you to decide. I like this lens. I think it's capable of taking great pictures. It has great color tonality and IQ. And then I'm going to do another photo shoot in normal weather and stop down using a slower a slower ISO and a faster shutter speed, and see what sort of results I get. Now, I was using ISO 1600 for a Yuletime photo shoot. I just was on manual. I had the shutter fixed at 1/25 of a second, and I was shooting wide open at f4. I think the lens did an admirable job, except on the lights, but it gave a lot of character. Some lenses are strictly butterflies or bat wings. This was like really complex, amazing chroma and flare. I really don't know what the cause is, or if this disqualifies this lens for anything. I really like this lens, and I'm going to take some more pictures with it. So let's get right into it without further doggy-do, and look at the, oh, and one other thing. Of course, what I did is 16:9 full frame crop, resized it to 1920 by 1080, and then I made a crop mask of 1920 by 1080, and I went into various corners, and I just cropped to that size to fit the movie format. And you can still see the results that way. So let's get into it. All right, so these pictures are all taken in the same locale across some different lenses, but on the same camera. So if these pictures look more contrasty and yellowish as compared to the other ones that look like slightly less contrast and bluish, well, that's the lenses, because I didn't change anything in the camera. 1600, 1/25 of a second, and I kept all the other parameters the same. So look at this, that's a 10:7. It's the end of December. And of course it's going to be dark then. And it was 15 degrees out. And this lens was in the car, 40-minute drive. And I just walked down the street 5 minutes and start taking pictures. Look at the coma here. Wow, that's scary, isn't it? Complex, really. And of course, this is on the edge, but this is a crop sensor. So imagine if it's on a full frame. If you look at the point, well, here's a perfect example. These are extended images, there's no point lights, and it's a very usable image, right? It may be a little soft, but it's still usable. Here is, look at these comas here. Amazing, isn't it? I'm sure the lenses, the lens barrel, which was metal, was contracting faster than the lenses were and probably was putting distortion on them. Look at the texture of the guy's hat, and then look at the point lights. So there's a difference between point lights and extended images. That's why I'm trying not to say this is a bad lens. And under these situations, I think that's putting a negative on it. If you look at here, like the tower, the branches, the extended images, they look pretty good. This is at the 24mm setting, so there is some perspective from distortion. This is a manger they had here. So there's no point lights here. It's up in the upper right-hand corner, but if you look at this image, it's a totally usable image here. Of course, here's our friends, the point lights, and all the crazy things they're doing. I mean, look at that. But if you look at the bench looks pretty good, and the wire looks pretty good. Of course, it's 1600, and I think you're losing some detail in the grass. So I was always focusing on the center subject. So I don't know in relation on the edges that could be inside of focus or outside of focus, and that's makes the flare and coma look different, without a doubt. Oh man, that's heavy duty flare, isn't it? That's amazing. That's why I got to reshoot this lens in more salubrious climate to see if I could reproduce this or not, or just get normal pictures that, you know, look at this toy soldier, he looks pretty good. This is the fountain. They run the fountain in, you know, spring, summer, fall. And here's on the very edge, if you look at the extended subjects, they look pretty good. So there's just this point effect of the lights. Of course, that may make the picture look interesting. I'm not knocking it or saying it's undesirable. It might give the lens some artistic flair. Oh, I made a pun, a joke. But it definitely gives it character. Now look at the street plug, the fire plug, and the lamp post there. They're pretty sharp and well defined. Now here's a picture without any light, point light sources. And if you look on the extreme right, well, that looks pretty sharp there, and it's well defined, although some of the other yellow signs look a little soft. Chef Freddy's table, man, he got hammered when they were putting this building up. Oh man, they should be compensating him, you know, for the inconvenience. To my eye, it still looked a little dark here, but the camera made it look more brighter than it was. And here's a, you know, an extended objects on the edge of field, and they look relatively sharp and usable. There is still some flare and ghosting. You can see it in these street lamps. But you got to remember, this lens has to be like 30 years old. Now this is not at the wide angle setting, but look how straight these lines are. I mean, there's really no distortion there. No pincushion, no barrel distortion, so that's a plus for this lens. I gotta admit that it's a very distortion-free lens. Here we go again. The straight lines remain straight. And look at the bricks. The bricks, they don't exhibit any distortion really. So that's a plus for a lens, especially if you're going to do a lot of city shooting. I like the color. I like the way it produces images. It's not a bad lens. And then now we get away from all the lights. However, it's same day, just later on in the day. Still early enough that the sun is casting these long shadows. And I reduced the ISO. I stopped down the lens. I was able to use a faster shutter speed. Well, it's still a little soft, but, what can I say? Well, here's an interesting picture. This is bright sunlight. I press the stop down even more. Let's see what this corner looks like. Well, it's in an extreme lower right-hand corner, still a little soft, but, it's more in focus. I might have been at an infinity focus. Oh, that's one thing about this lens. It did not have a depth of field scale. I thought that was a little cheesy. The build quality was excellent. It looked in excellent condition. The optics were clean. And it does take good, nice, contrasty pictures. So you could look at this whole series, see what other lenses I shot with this camera, and how they produce their images. Like, all right, they have Z lenses, even used, they're hundreds of dollars. Whereas I picked this lens up for like $120 or something like that. If you have one of the Pentax series of digital SLRs, the A setting would work. This has an A setting on it, so you could adjust the aperture from the camera without having to turn the aperture ring. So that's a cool too. Of course, this is December, and although the sky was very clear, the sun was still low, and everything had a rosy glow to it, which I like. The brick wall from the ancient astronauts. Well, this looks really sharp, and maybe I was down at f11 or something. So that was actually pretty sharp and pretty good. But do you think, yeah, oh, doesn't this look like the polar ice cap of Mars? I should loan this picture to NASA. Icicles, I love icicles. And of course, to get the motion blur of the water, I had to use a low ISO and a slow shutter speed. So if these pictures look a little blurry, that could be slight motion blur. The Z50 doesn't have built-in image stabilization, and of course neither did this ancient lens I'm using. So these pictures, I might use a higher ISO and a higher shutter speed, and of course they look somewhat more sharper because there's no motion blur. So there's always a trade-off. Of course, if you happen to have a tree to lean up against, then it helps when you're doing your longer exposures, like an eighth of a second or something. Some people can hold their breath and get a nice picture at eighth of a second, and I can't unless I'm leaning up against something. But I like the tonal range of this lens. This lens has this excellent tonal range, from lights and darks. I mean, the range of colors and the shades and the ice is unbelievable. I like ice. Ice is way cool. And it was still cold. It was like 20, in the mid-20s or something like that, so it was still cold. And this is the same day. I went, drove to this town, took the light spectacular, went to the reservoir, and then I went to this park all in one morning. And that means that the lens is going back in the car and driving around, getting warmed up and going out and cooling off again. So it was a super duper torture test. Of course, now we had a warmer winter after this, and all this ice is gone. It was only there for like 3 or 4 days. And now they're saying it's good. These ice crystals deposited because the air was so cold. There's some water in the air because the stream is nearby, and it made these like ice needle crystal flowery looking things. Yeah, look, check these ice crystals out here. Excellent lens even for close-ups. Really like it. Nice, huh?